The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
We briefly discussed on Monday the push towards war with Iran. The President of the United States, while he's given the appearance that he does not want a conflict with Iran, his actions, his hubris, his ego, all fall neatly in line with that of the neoconservative faction of his wing. It's a useful tool. His ego has become a useful tool for the John Boltons of the world, the Mike Pompeos of the world, who want nothing more than to go to war with Iran. And we are now one step closer to that with Trump's decision to send 1,000 troops into the region upon the announcement by Iran that they were going to begin enriching uranium again, which has been labeled as Iran breaking the nuclear deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action that was instituted by the Obama administration underneath the leadership of then Secretary of State John Kerry. They're saying that Iran deciding to enrich uranium again is a violation of that agreement. But Donald Trump pulled out of that agreement May 2018, just over a year ago. So how can they violate something that the United States had already pulled out of? In fact, the United States violated the agreement themselves by instituting new sanctions on the Iranian regime. This is so convoluted and such an unnecessary push to war that Donald Trump is considering. I believe he's considering not ideologically, but politically, because he knows that if he's a wartime president, there's no way anyone is going to impeach him. And there's a very good likelihood that he will be reelected. And also because he has this undying hatred and jealousy of Barack Obama and the desire to undo everything Barack Obama did, including the Iranian deal. And that combination has become a useful tool of the neoconservatives in the United States of America, who have been planning war with Iran at least since the Iranian Revolution, 1979 Iranian Revolution, at least since then. And the irony of it is that, most people probably know this at this point, but I find it necessary to just go over it again. The reason we are in the situation we are in with Iran, the reason there was an Iranian Revolution in the first place, 1979, was because the United States instituted a regime change, a coup in 1953 to overthrow the democratically elected president the democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. And if you want to know why we did that in 1953, you can guess. I mean, just take, some context clues of the time, right? It was the fear of communism, because Mossadegh, in an attempt to hold a British oil company accountable, decided that since this British oil company does not want to be held accountable, does not want us to inspect their books and audit them, that we'll nationalize our oil sector. And that was all the United States needed to hear. And the CIA, along with the UK, the British MI6, underneath the leadership of Winston Churchill in the UK and Dwight Eisenhower here in the United States, commenced with the Operation Ajax. This is all public information at this point because of a Freedom of Information Act back in 2013 opened up the public. I mean, most people knew this. It was an open secret. But when we got the official documents, you saw the planning and the execution of the coup in 1953 that ultimately led to the overthrow of the Shah, the Shah who the United States backed in the 1953 coup. And in 1979, the Iranian Revolution was a reaction to that 1953 coup. And prior to that, the irony of it is, the United States had decent relations with Iran. I mean, they had a democracy there. and before and prior to the coup and prior to the 1979 revolution. So the United States literally made the situation worse and created the exact situation that we're dealing with now a generation later. We created the problem. And now the solution the solution to the problem that the United States created in 1953 is now to go to war with them for one more shot at regime change in the lifetime of some of these individuals, some of the people who are old enough to remember the 1953 coup. One more chance. Maybe we'll get it right this time by having an all-out war with Iran. Never mind the geopolitical factors that are involved in this, our allyship with Saudi Arabia, Iran being the preeminent challenge to Saudi Arabia's hegemony there, their power there. So Iran is the challenge for Saudi Arabia. So much so that MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, described the current Ayatollah Khamenei, it's difficult pronouncing that, Khamenei, described him as a Hitler. Well, never mind the gross atrocities that take place in Saudi Arabia every day. It is quite literally a religious theocracy, a monarchical theocracy, where beheadings take place on a regular basis. The beheadings of children, of individuals who were arrested as teenagers, kept in prison just long enough for them to be a ripe age of 21 and then beheaded. And it's the irony of Saudi Arabia. And then there's even more irony, because if we have a fear of the terrorism that comes from Iran, and yes, Iran is a state sponsor of terror, but we seem to be doing quite okay with Saudi Arabia being our best buddies, despite the fact that that Saudi Arabia is a sponsor of terrorism. And from Saudi Arabia comes one of the most fundamentalist interpretations of Islam, which lead to the radicalization of so many of the terrorists that we deal with. Wahhabism. Like that is the theological underpinnings of the majority of the radical Islam that conservatives always talk about. Oh, radical Islamic terrorism. Well, the theology underneath it, the theological underpinnings underneath it, comes from Saudi Arabia. And never mind the fact that 19 of the 21 hijackers on 9/11 came from Saudi Arabia. We seem to be just fine with having a full-blown relationship with a state that is a hotbed for terrorism. So, and I only bring that up because it's never really about the threat or fear of terrorism. The war on terror was never even about the war on terror. It was always about the expansion of American influence in the region and the support for our allies in the region, namely Saudi Arabia. But, hey, we're terrified of Iran. And now we have a moron in the White House who, for all intents and purposes, probably does not want to go to war with Iran, but his ego has created the exact conditions necessary for us to go to war with Iran. And hey, it just so happens it's going to help him out to get reelected. This is why I talked about in the patrons episode on Monday that you should go check out patreon.com/the BPD show. Hate to put such an egregious self-promotion in the middle of the show, but I digress. This is why I talked about that on Monday. Why it is so easy and so necessary and so politically brilliant, as well as morally the correct thing to do for one of these 2020 candidates to come out against any conflict with Iran. It's good politics. If you're not a moral person and you don't really care about the moral justification for us to not go to war with Iran, when there are plenty of reasons for us morally not to go to war with Iran. Number one, Iran is not the aggressor in this equation. Iran came to the table, negotiated, and came up with a deal that would have allowed them to enter into the international community. Talking about the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the Obama nuclear deal with Iran. It was never about stopping them from having a nuclear weapon forever, because it's almost impossible. There's so many things about this that I'm going to go on all the tangents. I'm taking all the tangents today, and we'll come back. Iran, we have let the genie out of the bottle in terms of nuclear proliferation in the long run. In the short run, we can prevent, we can negotiate, we can stop, we can do everything we can to stop the proliferation of nuclear arms. But in the long run, it's almost impossible for us to stop nations from getting the technology necessary to have nuclear weapons. And so the idea behind the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was always about bringing Iran into the international fold so that they would have a vested interest in protecting the international system versus being a pariah, being an outcast in the international community and having nuclear weapons, which is the perfect conditions for a disaster. So the JCPOA was never about stopping Iran in the long run, because it's going to be impossible in the long run to stop almost any nation from getting a nuclear weapon in the long run. But what we can do is buy ourselves time to incorporate them into this international society that gives them a vested interest in not trying to destroy the international society. And that's what this was about. And this is actually where neoliberalism on the international stage, not the economic paradigm about free trade but no, it's on the international stage, international relations theory, neoliberalism focuses on cooperation between states, economic cooperation between states, viewing the international world through the lens of cooperation versus conflict. And this is what Barack Obama firmly believed. He firmly believed that if we can adopt a nation into the international fold, then we get multiple benefits from it. Number one, we get a vested interest to sustain this international community. The alternative is the realist paradigm, realism that believes that the fundamental interaction on the international stage is based on power, who has it and who does it, and who can force other states to do what they want to do. And this is the worldview of neoconservatives. Neoconservatives believe that we must, through force, compel every nation on the face of this planet to acquiesce to the demands of the United States. It is quite literally an imperialist view of the world. Like, this is the true imperialism. When you think about it, it's about saying, listen, you're either going to do what we say, Iran, or we're going to destroy you. Or the Barack Obama approach, this neoliberal international relations theory approach, which says, hey, we're going to cooperate. We want you to cooperate. We're going to give you time to build your economy, to come into the international community and be a part of all the spoils that come with it, all the luxuries that come, yes, for your elite. That come from your elite. They're trying to appeal to the elite of the society. If you're wealthy in Iran now, in 10 years, you could be wealthy on the international stage. Imagine how many yachts you can buy then. It is an appeal to elitism. It is an appeal to economic spoils. But it was the worldview that our only other option is to go to war. And so instead of going to war, the JCPOA said, hey, we're going to give some and you're going to give some. Iran, you're going to give up your immediate nuclear ambitions. Mind you, you're probably going to be able to get it within a decade. But right now, our goal is to assimilate you into this international community so that by the time you get that nuclear weapon, you have a vested interest not to use it. That's the difference between neoliberalism on the international stage in terms of international relations theory and neoconservatism. Don't conflate it purely with American domestic neoliberal economic policies. While there is some overlap, definitely some overlap in terms of appealing to the elites, obviously. But that was the plan. And so now, coming back full circle to how I got on this tangent, it's not Iran who violated that plan. It was the Trump administration. The Trump administration backed out of the agreement. making false claims that Iran wasn't abiding by it. But every time an inspector went to check to see if Iran was abiding by the agreement, Iran passed the test. They were abiding by the agreement. And even now, and this is the most insane thing about this, Iran is not the aggressor, so much so that President Hassan Rouhani has come out and just expressly said yesterday that we're not going to war with any nation. Literally said we are not going to war with any nation. And he also said that we will come back to the negotiating table when the United States comes back to the negotiating table, because the United States left the negotiation table first. So Iran is literally out here saying, hey, we ain't trying to fight. We're not trying to fight with you. You know, you left the table, but we'll be here when you come back. And as a reaction to the United States aggression, they have said, in the meantime, until you come back to the table, we're going to start enriching uranium again. And now all the media outlets are like, oh, Iran is violating the nuclear agreement and by enriching uranium again. But I mean, hello, this is more than a year after the United States pulled out of an agreement. So how can Iran violate an agreement that the United States already pulled out of? What's more, they've given the remaining members of the JCPOA, which was, I believe, China, Russia, France, China, Russia, France, the UK, and one more nation that were at the table with them. They've given those states the opportunity to get the United States in check. They gave them 60 days, and then they're going to begin enriching uranium. So this just shows you how much this is the United States' fault. The situation that we're in, everything about this, the fact that there is an Iranian-revolution that exists to this day is the fault of the United States, because we overthrew the democratically elected government in 1953. So the reason we're having this conversation today is because of the United States, number one. And the reason we're having a conversation about Iran enriching uranium again is because the United States, underneath Donald Trump, pulled out of the agreement that the previous administration got us into. Oh, it was a weak agreement. Here are your alternatives, morons. Your alternative is to either acclimate them and assimilate them into this international community and make them a global partner, even if they're a competitor / frenemy, the best way to describe it, because we're not necessarily besties with China, but we sure as hell are not going to go into a conflict with China. Iran would have been, we're not besties with Russia, but we sure as hell are not going to go to a conflict with Russia. And it's not just because they have nuclear weapons. We're not going to go to war with either of those economies because of their economies. Because our economies are interdependent. And if we went to war with either one of those players, we would undermine our own best interests. Any of them. I mean, not just those players, but even our allies. And so our alternatives, morons, is to either bring them into the international fold, which will make them good behaving players. Probably even better behaved players than Saudi Arabia when you consider what's going on in that nation, in that kingdom. Either you bring them into the fold or you go and try to commit regime change. And we see how that has played out over the years, over the decades. And how many people would have to die for that? Not only how many people will have to die for that, just American soldiers, yes, but Iranian citizens, yes. But then you undermine a nation that is, 3-4 times the size of Iraq. And you see how good we're doing in Iraq. You see how long we've been there for. 9/11 was 2001. So we have children who were born on 9/11 who are old enough to serve, who are probably serving in the military now. And you want to go start another war when we haven't finished haven't finished our commitments in Iraq, Afghanistan. We haven't finished our commitments in Syria. We've destabilized Gaddafi. We killed Gaddafi and destabilized Libya. You want to start another war when we had a pathway to prosperity and peace? Because say what you want to, I mean, if as bad of a system as elitism fosters, the one thing that you can probably guarantee is that you won't have a global war if all the elites are making a whole lot of money and they're happy about it. That's literally what the JCPOA was going to do, was going to make the rich people in Iran even richer than they could ever imagine through peace and economic interdependence, and bring them into the global fold and giving them time to become well-behaved international actors. We weren't going to try to overthrow the Iranian-revolution regime. We weren't going to overthrow Ayatollah Khamenei. I'm trying to pronounce it right. Ayatollah Khamenei. And it's not a laughing matter. I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for laughing at something so serious, but this is utterly ridiculous that we're at this point now where we're going to have troops. I mean, listen. I mean, we always talk about, we don't, but people always talk about comparisons between the American Empire and the Roman Empire. And of course, you know, the way the Roman Empire fell was because they overexpanded. They expanded too far, too fast, and did not have the resources to actually sustain soldiers in so many regions of the world. Well, holy hot damn, that's exactly what the United States is doing right now. And so coming all the way back to, this is why it's such a good political position for a Democrat to come out and stand firm and hard based on the evidence and show why we absolutely must not go to war with Iran on moral grounds, but also on geopolitical grounds and also on domestic politics grounds. Because number one, Democrats should all be still upset about Donald Trump pulling us out of the Iranian nuclear deal in the first place. Democrats should be upset about the possibility of Donald Trump getting wartime powers, even though part of the problem here, again, like, we're going to take all the tangents. I hope you're hanging in there and kept keeping up. Part of the problem is that the Democrats like the imperialist presidency model themselves. And because we did not constrain Barack Obama, and Obama was able to gallivant across the globe in military expeditions without the use of authorization of use of military force, AUMF, because we didn't fix that problem with Democrats, well, Donald Trump actually does not need permission from the United States to go to war. Call it what you want to. It may not be a quote unquote official war, but it is absolutely the ability of the president of the United States to send troops into a region, into a combat theater without permission from Congress. And Democrats are complicit with that as well, which is why it's an awesome opportunity to, I mean, look at everyone that you could bring into this coalition, an anti-war coalition right now. I mean, again, you have to excuse me. As much as I am a person of deep morals, I mean, most of the time I got some things that, you know, I don't actually not that moral, but that's not the point. In terms of morality and war, I can make the argument on an emotional, moral ground, period, that we could. But also forgive me, because I can completely set aside the morals and look at the political expediency of this. Like, it's the perfect political combination to create. I mean, you would unify the resistance who would not want Donald Trump to be a wartime president. You would unify the resistance and the Democratic establishment, and you can pin the Democratic establishment in the corner because of what Trump has done to the JCPOA leading to this. But instead of that, you have people like Nancy Pelosi and Kamala Harris who are coming out, and Adam Schiff who are coming out saying, oh, Iran is really a problem. No, you stupid motherfuckers. America is the problem. Donald Trump was the problem. The problem is Donald Trump undermined the nuclear agreement that your boy Barack Obama got on the books. So it's a perfect opportunity to find the remnant, the remaining portion of the Democratic establishment that is not so in bed with the military industrial complex that they can actually be appealed to based on pure partisan politics. And saying, hey, this was an agreement that was drawn up by Barack Obama, and you should support Barack Obama still. And another tangent. I'm taking all the tangents. This to me really shows you that perhaps Barack Obama did buck against the system a lot harder than we give him credit for, because Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Kamala Harris, all of these people have not looked back whatsoever at the agreement that Barack Obama made with Iran. They haven't given it a second thought, and they've pushed forward with their own war rhetoric. So maybe, just maybe, Barack Obama actually did do something against the military industrial complex, because now it's like everybody completely forgot about their partisan commitment to, sticking to whatever Democrats do in exchange for a possibility of war, or at least a war language. They won't push us to war. They'll give us all the language we need for war, and then Donald Trump's ego would trip us over the rest of the way. I don't know who said, I think it was Adam Johnson on Twitter. He said Democrats are going to run the war language all the way to the 1 yard line. They're going to run 99 yards with it, come to the 1 yard line, and then start complaining about Trump. And then Trump is just going to just fall over the goal line and take us into war. He said it much better than that, but that's the summary. So this is going back. It's a perfect political opportunity for a Democrat to come out of the ranks and say no to war with Iran. No war with Iran. And you unify the resistance who will just oppose Donald Trump no matter what. And so clearly they're not going to want him to be a wartime president, because we are not going to impeach a wartime president. Then you can get the few members of the Democratic establishment that are not in bed with the military industrial complex. Forget about Nancy Pelosi. Forget about Adam Schiff. Forget about people like that. We have to fight against them. Then you're going to get the anti-war movement, right? And you're going to get a lot of the left. That is the coalition. That is the coalition that's going to win the election. And I don't care if you are no name, like I don't even know the no names. But wherever you are in the polls, you have the perfect opportunity politically to stand above the rest and demand that the United States not go to war with Iran for all of the reasons that I've outlined. Number one, they want to come back to the table. Hassan Rouhani wants to come back to the table and has expressly said we're not going to war, and we're just waiting on America to come back to the table. Number two, the JCPOA was the very worst option. If you think it's an untenable and unbearable idea that Iran, the current regime, the Iranian-revolution regime that is in power and has been in power since 1979, if you think it's the absolute worst idea for them to be assimilated into the global community, then the only thing worse than that would be the fact that we would completely destroy any, war with them would not only destroy Iran, destabilize the region, but it would be too big for the United States to handle. We cannot stretch our military. We would have to institute a draft. So the coalition would be based on the political arguments would be based on, number one, Iran wants to come back to the table. Number two, we can't afford a war with Iran because we're so stretched with all of our other wars. Number three, Donald Trump is not competent enough to preside over a military conflict. Can you imagine? Can you imagine his Twitter feed? Number four, just pure partisan politics. Your team came up with the worst case and the best of the worst solutions. Barack Obama, this is his legacy. I mean, if nothing else, appeal to those people who are like, Obamaites. That's a hell of a coalition. And you throw in some Medicare for all, and man, you win. You win. You're the next president of the United States. I don't know if I covered all the bases. I don't know if I tied up every loose end. I went on at least 30 tangents today. Not really, probably 8 tangents. But the fact that, I'm sorry if this was if not my best presented podcast. But to hell with it. No war with Iran. That's it. That's it. Go to patreon.com/the BPD show. Become a patron today. Help us to continue pushing and speaking truth to power. We need you. Go right now. This is the end of the podcast. So you don't even have to stay here. Cut this off and go to patreon.com/the BPD show and become a patron. I'll see you next time.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.